My talk is looking at DevOps Topologies 10 years on, and silos and collaboration and flow. I'm the founder at Conflux. I'm the co-author of the book Team Topologies. What I tend to see myself doing these days is ecosystem engineering. I don't know if that's a thing, but it is now. We'll see. So the book Team Topologies was published September 2019. That makes it 4.5 roughly years old. But this is the question I'd like to explore today. 10 years after State of DevOps Report and DevOps Topologies, what is holding back lower performing organizations from improving their IT delivery performance? This is a multi-million, possibly billion-dollar question, right? If we're going to be honest. So it'll look like this. We'll look at a bit of history first. We'll look at the cost of tangled software. That's not about Rapunzel. It's about the state of software delivery. We'll look at a few approaches, including some accelerate metrics and using some ideas of Team Topologies to help with flow, and then look at some success patterns. But this is the short version. If you want to go to sleep, that's fine. I'm a bit tired too. This is the short version here. Almost all decisions across the organization, not just in technology, but in product, just like we've heard with Melissa, almost all decisions need to use twin lenses, like a pair of spectacles. And those lenses are fast flow and team cognitive load. This is what I've realized since the book was published 4.5 years ago. Like, you won't actually find that quotation in the Team Topologies book, but this is my realization. And hopefully it'll become clear why that's a thing. If you want to doze off a little bit, then just look for these yellow slides, because these are the key points. You can't really miss them. I don't mind, it's fine. Okay, so 10 years on. So 2013, I was working in an organization in London, not far from here, and there was basically some epic battles between development and operations. All kind of fights around responsibilities, around flow, around who does what with which bit of technology, blah, blah, blah. And this is quite common back then. This is why the whole DevOps movement came about, right? Bringing together development and operations teams to make things more effective. And I published a blog post, which is basically a rant. Like, you're not supposed to rant. This is bad advice, but it was basically a rant. But the way I pulled it together, it was kind of like a friendly rant. And on my little blog, it still gets like 1,000 views a month, which for me is like, whoa, that's amazing. And I explored different kind of ways in which development teams and operations teams might work effectively together or might not work effectively together. And it had some Venn diagrams that look a little bit like these. It's still there. What we did is we put this together into something a bit more polished. We called it DevOps Topologies. You can still go there if you go to devopstopologies.com. You'll still find the patterns. And it's like a catalog of like bad ways of working and good ways of working if you're thinking about kind of technology delivery and operating software-based services. So it's a useful starting point. Now, this ended up being picked up by some quite large organizations like Netflix, publicly thanked us for these patterns to help them think about how they run their teams. And Condé Nast, the big publishing house, Accenture, and so on and so on. Lots of organizations using these and publicly acknowledging the value. And so there's more and more interest, and we did some work with a large Chinese technology company, 70,000 people worldwide, based on these kind of patterns and things like this, and more and more work with lots of different organizations. And then eventually we spoke to Gene Kim, so a huge figure in kind of the whole DevOps movement with Phoenix Project and DevOps Handbook and blah, blah, blah. And we agreed that we'd write a book, or that my co-author and I, Manuel, would write a book. And there's loads of other people as well who've been super inspirational. And so I just want to give a bit of a shout out to Gene and his amazing team. He's like a kind of a force of nature in IT. And they persuaded, kind of together, we persuaded to pull together Team Topologies book. Now, there's loads of different organizations worldwide that have been using the ideas. These are just some of the organizations that have talked publicly about using team topologies ideas over the last few years. So lots of different sectors, lots of different contexts. Certainly anywhere where software-enriched services are being built and run, but actually the team topologies ideas are now being used outside of IT as well outside of a DevOps context. You can, if you like, buy some posters that capture these ideas. You can download a PDF, or you can buy printed versions, scan the QR code if you like. They're quite handy. Put them on the wall to remind people of, I guess, things not to do. The orange one is things not to do, and the blue one is maybe try this instead. But what's been interesting for me is to think, you can see there in the diagrams. We'll have a look at some examples in a minute. But the diagrams are quite static. They show a kind of static, unchanging relationship between different teams, which is a useful starting point, but the team topologies ideas go well beyond these initial starting points. Here's an example. What we call anti-type B, this is a DevOps team silo. We've got development and operations, but then there's something called like a DevOps team. I don't know what they do. They do like really gnarly stuff with like Kubernetes and like monitoring and kind of stuff we don't really want to know about. And they stop these two groups from talking to each other. Another one is when the DevOps team is just like rebranded system administrators, but they call themselves DevOps, it's more cool. There's also fake SRE, where we've got development and then a group called SRE, but that's basically just old style operations, and they still don't talk to each other. So there's lots of like kind of amusing and you have to kind of teeth-sucking moments where you have to realize that this is where your organization is at the moment. So it's worth reflecting on that and thinking, can we do better? And there's some kind of positive examples, like here's something called Type 1, Dev and Ops collaboration, working together, but only a little bit. There's a little bit of overlap, but not too much. Now, in the team topologies book, this looks a little bit different. There's a change of diagramming style. The colors look somewhat similar, but there's a change of diagramming style, and there's an explicit flow of value in the team topologies diagrams, left to right. Sorry for those of you who speak Hebrew or Arabic, we have to pick a direction. So we're going left to right in terms of the flow of value. And the diagram on the right is how we represent this now. We've got what we call a stream aligned team, a team aligned to the stream of value, working on like a user journey or product or service. And they're currently collaborating with a kind of platform, what we call a platform grouping. But this is, in the team topologies world, this is a temporary state. It's not a permanent thing. So then the team topologies perspective is more dynamic. We're thinking about a kind of snapshot in time of the interactions between these two teams. From the original DevOps topology stuff from 10 years ago, we got type 3, ops as infrastructure as a service. So there's no overlap particularly, or there's not much kind of collaboration going on. But what's actually happening is operations is effectively providing something that we would now call like a platform, hence all the platform engineering stuff. The way we would represent this these days in the team topologies diagram is like on the right-hand side, we've got some services being provided. That X as a service is an interaction mode. The platform is providing those services out to the couple of streamlined teams that we've got shown in yellow. And then we might have another positive example from the original DevOps topology stuff is like this type 5, DevOps team with an expiry date. So it's still, there's a team sitting in between these two groups, but their aim is to pull those two groups together, and then the DevOps team kind of expires. And the way we would represent this these days is as an enabling team in team topologies terminology, facilitating. And in fact, often what we see is that the enabling team kind of comes out of the platform. A group of people who normally work in the platform come out of the platform as an enabling team, group of experts, help the streamlined team to get better at doing something, and then bring that experience back into the platform. So there's a dynamic associated with this stuff rather than it being static. And I'm actually wearing enabling team purple today, because that's how I see my role, so on brand. The team topologies diagrams are always just snapshots in time. They're never fixed designs for the organization. One of the problems that we've come across is, in fact, we had We had an inbound request from a large European-based food delivery service recently, and they basically asked us, hey, can you come in and design our organization using team topologies, because that's going to fix everything. And we're like, it's not going to happen. Success in this space lies in addressing the dynamic interactions between teams, not just the static structure alone. By the way, all of these slides will be online later. I go through slides very, very quickly. Melissa was very kind. She left the slides up there for quite a long time, so plenty of time to take pictures. Every slide's got a slide number, so you can just make a note of the slide number, and the slides are actually already online. So, these are the first thing that I recommend that I'd like to suggest as a key point. Think about the dynamic interactions between teams, not just like a static new structure for your organization. That's not sufficient. Never has been sufficient, but it's particularly important now. And I can guarantee that, do you remember the slide from Melissa's talk, which is showing the organizations doing product ops? I can guarantee, whether or not they're explicitly thinking about it, they are definitely they've got things in place which address the dynamic interactions between different teams and groups in their organization. Absolutely guaranteed. Okay, let's have a tiny little look at the State of DevOps reports. Who has read at least one State of DevOps report? Not everyone, maybe about half. Interesting. Go and read some. Go and read them. There's actually a special page, like history page. I think I've linked it. Yes, at the bottom right corner of the slide, there's a link to the history of the State of DevOps reports. Like an annual survey of thousands of people worldwide. It started in 2013, so it's been going for more than 10 years. And these reports have really helped to shape the thinking and practices and direction of travel for the whole IT industry, really, particularly the parts where we're building and running software-enriched services. So you can see here the book Accelerate, which is published by the same publisher as Team Topologies. That came out 2018, about halfway through. Team Topologies the following year. Really valuable, and you have to give your email address, but they're otherwise free to download. Here's some examples. The use of cloud is predictive of software delivery performance and availability. High performers favor strategies that create community structures at both low and high levels in the organization. These are they're identifying practices that predict high performance in organizations. And there's some things which are a bit more spicy. Look at this. Change approval boards negatively impact speed and stability. That's a complete brain exploding thing for loads of people. Because, well, if we're running ITIL, we need a cab. But when we're going quickly, and when we've got technology to help us, and so on, some of the practices and principles that were kind of okay-ish from the past, from say 15, 20, 25 years ago, just don't apply. Absolutely don't apply now, because the dynamics are different. And there's some detail there about how they use a kind of structured equation model to deal with this kind of predictive capability. So it's not just kind of opinion surveys, there's more statistical rigor behind these things. Now, in the 2021 report, it's actually explicitly talked about team topologies. And team topologies practices are actually now predictive of higher organizational performance according to the State of DevOps reports. So highly evolved organizations tend to follow the team topologies model. Now, it's not entirely surprising because some of the stuff that we included in the team topologies book was based on higher performing organizations. So it's a little bit circular logic to an extent, but what we're saying is we've codified that to an extent and presenting it back. And so then there's something that's easier to follow rather than just sort of blindly copying what Amazon's doing or what Netflix is doing. Because we've got the underlying principles and language. Team topologies ideas are now a key part of the AWS well-architected guidance. So Amazon Web Services now includes recommendations to use TT ideas. And likewise, in the Microsoft Azure Cloud Adoption Framework, they're in there as well. So if you're using either of those approaches, then you'll be increasingly find recommendations from those two cloud providers to use some of the TT ideas. And if you actually look, the original State of DevOps report from 2013 has got kind of Venn diagrams. It looks a little bit similar to the DevOps topology. I actually only saw that when I was preparing the slides. So these two sets of things have been a kind of practitioner-led co-evolution. They've shaped each other. We've been informed by State of DevOps report, and now State of DevOps report has been informed by team topologies. So it's been great to be part of this. very practitioner-led approach to moving on the practices and state of the art. Look at this. The Financial Conduct Authority in the UK is the regulator for many financial services-based organizations. They did some analysis. They published a report in 2021. Overall, we found that firms that deployed smaller, more frequent releases had higher change success rates than those with longer release cycles. Firms that made effective use of agile delivery methodologies were also less likely to experience a change incident. The financial services regulator in the UK is recommending these kind of DevOps practices. That's a massive, massive game changer, certainly in the UK, but also in related areas, like Europe, for example. We're working with a bank in Ireland. Technically speaking, they've got a different regulator, but the practices are so similar that it actually helps to shift things on. If the regulator is saying adopt these practices, it's probably time to adopt these practices. Okay, let's have a little look at the cost of what we might call tangled software. What we've seen over the last few years, working with lots of organizations, is that the way in which the underlying mindset, the way in which some organizations think about doing work creates a huge tangling between different teams who are involved. It might be called kind of delivery dependencies or something like that. Thought experiment. If each engineer in the organization is blocked for 1 hour per working day, how much does this cost? Now, actually, in some organizations, engineers are blocked for way more than 1 hour per working day. But let's be gentle and generous with them. 1 hour per working day, how much does it cost? So let's say the fully loaded cost is 160,000 per year, something like this. 260 paid days a year because we're in Europe, not in America, so we actually get some paid holiday. And there's a total of 400 engineers. How much does it cost? Hands up, anyone? Just throw out some answers.
800K.
800,000, anything else? 5 million. 8 million a year. Now, it's not necessarily a huge amount, but it's enough to do some interesting things. And as you start to scale the numbers up, and as you start to scale the amount of delay, you start to be able to have a conversation with the CFO. Hey, can we have 10 million to go and fix this problem? We're going to change how our teams are defined and work together and blah, blah, how strategy is deployed even. And we'll get an ROI in less than a year. That's a pretty straightforward conversation at that point. I mean, clearly this is a very simple calculation. You want a bit more data than that. But we can get to some useful amounts of money to fund some changes quite quickly. Untangling is kind of like decoupling. And decoupling is about separating things that do not need to be together. In lots of organizations, in many organizations, they couple things without thinking, without realizing. And actually, part of the success in this space is looking at the effective ways to decouple things that don't need to be together. Some things do need to be together. Train carriages do need to be together. We need them to be coupled. It's like in the cartoons when they do the decoupling and then half the train drifts off back down the mountain or whatever. Fine. So some things need to be coupled, but let's take a real look at the things that don't need to be. Because decoupling enables shorter time to value. So it's not just about time to... So part of the value is in being able to detect how effective that particular product feature or choice or whatever it is, so we can get that feedback back into the organization. And decoupling then enables multiple independent flows of change, each with its own cadence. So we don't have centralized control. There's now a little bit of we can't tell exactly when everything's going to land. We have to be comfortable with that. It's a change in mindset. So it looks a bit more like this. Multiple independent flows arriving at different times. So the value emerges. However, we can decouple teams and technology, but actually we need to put effort into mingling and sharing ideas and learning. So put effort into decoupling and then effort into helping to spread these ideas through a kind of diffusion of learning. Internal conferences, lunchtime talks, blog posts, whatever, sending people to conferences like this. And finding ways, we'll talk about a little bit about this later, but finding ways to kind of spread that learning across the organization then becomes really, really important. Because we've decoupled at the team and technology and product level, there's a danger that you end up with kind of these little product or technology silos. So we need to actively disperse learning across these different team boundaries. Even if, it relates to cost of delay as well. So even if your main driver is getting things out there as quickly as possible, then this kind of decoupling enables to reduce, well, to deal with the cost of delay by getting things out sooner. So organizing for fast flow helps us to remove inter-team dependencies, and it actually improves financial efficiency and time to value. And so these conversations are very relatively straightforward conversations to have with CFO and the Chief Product Officer. Okay, let's have a look at some interesting ways to use the Accelerate metrics and some team topology ideas to help with flow. Who's read Accelerate book? Oh, only about half. Okay, great book, highly recommended, from the same publisher as Team Topologies, which is IT Revolution, and some really key ideas in that Accelerate book. Definitely worth reading. So in the Accelerate book, they talk about 4 key metrics. Lead time, deployment frequency, mean time to restore, and change fail percentage. Now, these are not the only 4 metrics that you need to look at. And you want to be careful with, like anything, how you incentivize people in the organization to look at these metrics. Because if you just say, optimize for these metrics, you're going to get some crazy behavior out. People are going to go, okay, well, we've got the best lead time. Is the product any good? What about user feedback? Like, other things will suffer if you just try and optimize for these. However, there's a way to use these which feels quite useful. There's a couple of metrics which relate mostly to fast flow, which is lead time and deployment frequency. And there's a couple of metrics that relate to operability, how well the software works in production. And that's a dev and ops balance. That's why these 4 metrics are really nice. But there's another metric which is worthwhile looking at as well. And now, ideally, that 5th metric would be flow efficiency. The proportion of time spent during lead time, which is actually value-adding work. Because a lot of the time, we're spending waiting for other people. And in lots of organizations, the flow efficiency is something really crazy low, like 16%. So the majority of people's time in organizations is actually spent waiting on other people. And if you were to pitch that organization design to the board, would they buy it? Of course they wouldn't buy it. That's just madness. But this is the way that most organizations, or many organizations, run because it's not informed by flow principles, ultimately. Okay, so measuring wait time, this is what it looks like. We've got A, B, C, D, E. These are value-add activities, whatever they are. And then there's like some wait time in the middle. The tricky thing here is measuring the wait time is actually really difficult, often. It's quite debatable what it is. So what we can do as a proxy, as a reasonable proxy, is just measure the number of times that someone is blocked before they get that change, that value out of the door. So we just count the number of times. And some people have done this in really interesting ways. They've had like a little, those chess clocks that you can get when you're playing chess. You can just have a counter like that, starting, stopped, or a little app or something, or press a little button on your desktop to say I'm blocked. And all it's doing is counting the number of times that you've been blocked in terms of kind of building and releasing that feature that's related to value. Anyway, so we can use number of blocking waits as a proxy. It's a proxy for flow efficiency. Anyway, but here's the key thing. We can use these 5 metrics now to assess and find better service and team boundaries for flow. We use them like this. We can ask this question. If we adjusted the service or team boundary in this way, would it improve these 4 key metrics? Would it improve the blocker count. We reduce the blocker count. So we're thinking about team responsibilities, the interactions between teams, the kind of responsibility envelope, because it depends on the technology we're using. Bring in a new technology that allows us to, maybe that's going to help reduce our cognitive load, which allows us to take on more responsibility. Is that going to improve our flow? It might do. Let's try it. Run an experiment. But we've got a framework here to think about how we're using these metrics in service of better flow. It's not just trying to game the metrics themselves. And there's actually some tools in this space. I was just talking to someone earlier on about this. There's a new category of tool emerging. We don't know what this tool is called yet. But effectively, it's like organizational operating system, something like this. One example is Teamform. And they offer different lenses onto how you can design your organization or think about it. One of them is Team Topologies. There's Remote Agility Framework, and there's a bunch of others as well. If you're interested, there's actually someone from Teamform. I didn't know he was going to be here. Chris is here. He's at the front here, glasses, and he's wearing a Teamform hoodie. As it happens, and they're doing some really interesting work. There's an alternative, Team OS. Their new strapline, stop managing dependencies and start unblocking flow. I don't know what these tools are called yet. It's something like organizational operating system, something like that. Because we've now got, with Team Topologies and similar kind of perspectives, we've got the language and mental model to help us reason about what our organization could and should look like in terms of flow, in terms of value, and so on. And there's also some practitioner techniques to help in this space too, from the Team Topologies community. Something called Independent Service Heuristics, ISH. And these are rules of thumb or clues for identifying candidate value streams and domain boundaries. There are techniques, obviously, like domain-driven design, which are very comprehensive, but sometimes a little bit difficult to get started with. So techniques like ISH help multiple stakeholders to come together and think through potential different boundaries for flow. There's another technique called user needs mapping, and we start with user needs. We're inspired by what's called Wardley mapping, but we don't use all of the techniques from Wardley mapping, and it helps us think about where team boundaries might sit. It addresses something that Melissa was saying earlier on, like the fact that effectively people are not thinking about I can't remember how she articulated it, but it was about the people are not getting the feedback from how the product is being used. If we actually start with user needs and work backwards from there, it's a different perspective that helps us think through a much more effective way of arranging our capabilities, teams, skills, and so on. And there's something as well called team interaction modeling. And that's where we're thinking about how to reorganize teams and interactions for better flow. So there's some techniques they're open techniques. There's no licensing. You don't have to pay anything to use them. They're open and available to use. So point number 2 really for me is evolving at speed requires a set of core principles and practices, people trained up and engaged. And a lot of this stuff is not obvious. But let's have a look at some success with fast flow. JP Morgan, well-known financial services institution, gave a talk nearly a year ago now, isn't it? A fast flow conference in London, not far from here, just around the corner from where we are here in London, for those of us in the room. And the talk's actually on YouTube, which is fine if you're in an organization that still allows access to YouTube, but those of you who have YouTube blocks inside your organizational firewall will have to watch it at home. But anyway, they talked about how JP Morgan applied Team Topologies to improve flow in a market-leading enterprise platform. And it's really worth watching. There's one particular part of the talk in the middle, which is this. They mapped out the dependencies between different teams during delivery, the stuff I was talking about before about things being tangled. That's on the left-hand side. The detail doesn't matter, but you can see there's all kind of crazy spider diagram on the left-hand side. Lots of dependencies during delivery. They use the Team Topologies ideas, they reshaped their teams and architecture, and they ended up with the diagram on the right. Far fewer dependencies, much less tangled. And they actually reduced 60% of dependencies through better team design. Now, if you remember back to that calculation from earlier on, I don't know how much money they saved. But it's not a small amount of money, because they had quite a lot of people involved, and there was a lot of blocking. So this stuff is happening in the real world. It's happening, in that case, in financial services. If they're doing it, then the rest of us can do it too. So point number 3, unblock, don't coordinate. And that clearly is quite a weird concept, because lots of places we've got armies of managers coordinating things frantically, and letting go of that natural expectation to need to coordinate. It needs a bit of practice. It's a different way of thinking. A little bit of experience from my personal experience during 2018, actually partly as I was writing the Team Topologies book. I was the engineering lead for part of the UK government Home Office. And I was kind of slightly involved with a bit of work around this case study, which is online. How the Home Office's Immigration Technology Department reduced its cloud cost by 40%. Like, it's a really great story. I wasn't directly involved, but I sat literally next to the people who were doing it. And they had a really cool kind of EPC style cost efficiency thing, blah, blah, blah. This is not my main point. Their goal was to try and reduce cloud cost, and it was successful. But what was really interesting was that making service owners accountable for the monetary spend for their service actually helped to clarify service boundaries. Because then they had a very strong incentive, money, to think, is this part of the technology landscape actually part of my service or not? Let's have a proper conversation about the boundaries. So the cost metrics became like a financial knife or scalpel to split services apart for better flow. It was really interesting to see it. There's a few more principles from Team Topologies that suggest certain kind of approaches and architectures and things. So we've talked about this already, multiple independent flows, but fractally, so self-similar at different parts of the organization. So the blue box is what we would call in Team Topologies language a platform. So inside the platform, we've got multiple different flows. Outside the platform, we've got multiple flows. We need to respect what's called Conway's law, or socio-technical mirroring. So the shape of the organization will influence the shape of the system that we're building, and actually vice versa. So you've got to be aware of that. And do we want to fight against it? Probably not. Massively valuable to have clear ongoing ownership or maybe stewardship of services and systems. People having a sense of needing to look after this thing. Stream-aligned teams should have end-to-end responsibility for a service. This is sometimes called you build it, you run it. And what does it take for them to have that end-to-end responsibility? I mean, it needs to be a mix of skills. It needs to be limiting their team cognitive load and so on. This is a key unlock moment, really, in the Team Topologies book. The purpose of a platform is to improve flow and reduce team cognitive load. That's a really useful different perspective that Team Topologies brings. I think it's fair to say. Because previously, platform was either a piece of technology or was a way to share services or was a way to consolidate license costs. You know, those things are kind of useful side effects, but if you start with this as a perspective, it makes all sorts of things pop out really usefully, including things like strategy and purpose and things like, I'm thinking back to Melissa's like org chart with like 7 different strategies. If you think about it in terms of provision of services to improve flow, it really simplifies how you talk about what each different department is doing. Team Topologies recommends that teams are small, slowly changing with kind of aligned autonomy. The reason they're small is because we need to go very quickly. To go quickly, we need high trust. And one of the best ways to get high trust is to have a smaller group. The teams are also empowered to sense and change their responsibility boundaries and their technical boundaries to improve flow on a frequent basis. They can use some of those techniques that we've just looked at, like independent service heuristics, like user needs mapping, like team interaction modeling, to help them. They're empowered to do that. And ultimately, if you want kind of a quick snapshot of what some of this stuff looks like, it's an ecosystem of loosely coupled, independently viable services with clear boundaries and ownership aligned to the flow of business value. Bit of a mouthful, but that's the kind of picture that we're talking about. There's a book coming soon by Suzanne Kaiser, and the book is amazing. Adaptive Systems with Domain-Driven Design, Waterley Mapping, and Team Topologies. Architecture for Flow. This is the kind of stuff that's coming out now. This is the kind of stuff that is starting to emerge as people bring together different related practices. I work on a regular basis with Suzanne. She's amazing. So point number 4, we're expecting to have multiple loosely coupled flows of value with significant automation and helper tooling. But that is a different set of principles from what many organizations have, where they're trying to coordinate everything together. And this is what I've really realized, is Team Topologies is not a framework. Team Topologies is a set of coherent patterns to encourage emergent behaviors for fast flow. And anyone so it's applicable for certain kinds of organizations, certain kind of leaders. Leaders who want absolute cast iron surety and guarantees, it's going to be less suitable. Those leaders who recognize we're operating in a context which needs to allow things to emerge are going to be much more happy with this kind of way of working. I am going to skip forward a little bit. In the slide, you'll see a set of patterns here with some explanations. But I'm not going to go through every single one now. I'll pick out one or two little things. We've got some interaction modes. I've not really talked about them, but this relates to the dynamics between different teams. And the interaction modes effectively are kind of constraints, but they provide signals to tell us when something's not working. So we've now got a way to detect early on when the way we've got our team set up is not really effective, if we empower people with this kind of language and awareness. Fast flow is weird. Organizing for fast flow means we're happy with some duplication, like 2 or 3 different initiatives in the same kind of space, at least for a while. We've got different versions of things. We've got kind of an asynchronous approach to lots of stuff, to deploying features and so on into production or different services. Eventual consistency of data and capabilities inside production. We might have an internal marketplace. We might have 2 or 3 different teams providing similar services, and we allow them to sort of gently compete in order to discover things more quickly. This stuff is weird for loads of organizations. Here's a really interesting social media post from Adrian Cockcroft. He was at Sun Microsystems, Netflix, eBay, AWS, and so on. He knows about building software systems at scale. The work is defined in many small changes that are uncoordinated to enable flow. Management's job is to provide context, prioritization, and to coordinate across teams, lending resources if needed across teams to unblock things. It works well within a high-trust culture. That is your forward-facing, future-facing operating model. I can guarantee that those organizations that Melissa talked about that are doing product ops are, again, they've internalized a good chunk of this kind of stuff here. Team continuity load becomes a key design heuristic clue. Long-lived value streams, not short-lived projects, is a key learning here. And there's a whole lot of other stuff we need to do. I'm not going to talk about all of these. We need to realign our architecture. We need to get fast feedback, not just from deployment pipelines. We need good technical practices. Team ownership or stewardship of software and services becomes crucial. There's a bunch of other things that came out of the State of DevOps report. Psychological safety in teams becomes a key predictor of higher performance. And like I mentioned before, we need to find ways to actively diffuse learning and awareness across team boundaries. Otherwise, the knowledge stays inside these silos. So the boundaries are watertight for flow, but they're porous to learning. Our boundaries are watertight for flow, but porous to learning across there. And so we need these strong technical and social practices as a foundation for any of this. It's not surprising. All right, so let's try and answer this question. 10 years after State of DevOps report and DevOps Topologies, what's actually holding back low-performing organizations from improving their IT delivery performance? So the first thing is, like I've mentioned, organizing for flow feels weird. It feels really alien. We have to get our heads around it. There's lots of things that were common sense or standard in the past are no longer apply at all. In many organizations, they haven't really expected to have a big mindset shift. They're just expecting to tweak a few little things, and it's going to be enough. And actually, just the mindset shift is actually quite large. Often the kind of C-level or exec level concerns are not really addressed. We're talking too much at the technology level, let's say. But we can talk about things like financial efficiency in terms of flow. We can talk about shorter time to value from a product perspective. If we talk about these things, then we can get some unlock and enable the other activities to take place. Lots of organizations think they can just do like some kind of reorganization as a silver bullet and then they're done. And that's just almost like the worst thing you could possibly expect. It might be part of it, but it's not the only thing that's going to unlock it. They just see it as like a structural thing. Get a new structure in place, get a new org chart in place and we'll be fine. No, it's not going to happen. Lots of organizations have this tight coupling in time, this tangledness, and they're not doing anything to address it. So you could bring in DevOps, you can bring in team topologies, you can bring in a bunch of other things. If they haven't addressed that tight coupling in time in terms of delivery, nothing's going to change. And they're not spreading learning across the organization, and they're not enabling psychological safety from a leadership perspective. So these are some of the things I think which are limiting organizations from becoming more high-performing. The success factors that we've seen address the dynamic interactions between teams and groups, not just the static structure. Organizing for fast flow helps us to remove interteam dependencies. It improves financial efficiency and time to value. These are stories or these are points that we can go to the exec with and be more convincing. Evolving at speed requires a set of core principles and practices. People need to be actually trained up. Switching to a mindset where we're looking to unblock, not trying to coordinate. It's a huge shift for lots of people. We're expecting multiple loosely coupled flows of value with lots of automation and helper tooling. We're not just having one single kind of value flow. Team cognitive load becomes like a really keen design principle or heuristic. We're really thinking about the people involved. We're not just pushing more and more stuff onto the same people, because it's not particularly humane. And it's not very effective because people can't just keep taking more and more domain awareness or technology awareness or whatever. And it's unrealistic to expect them to be able to actually look after that service effectively. Definitely need to move towards long-lived value streams, not short-lived projects, because the services that we're building are long-lived most of the time. And we need this strong technical and social practices foundation underneath it all to make it work. And imagine a pair of spectacles, you know, 3D glasses like red and green or red and blue, these kind of 3D spectacles. Imagine it's like that. One of the lenses is fast flow and one is team topologies. When you put them on, you see things differently. A bit like going to the cinema in 3D. You see things differently. So it'd be interesting to hear your perspective. Which things resonate, which things seem like they don't resonate, or which things seem strange. If you're interested, my company provides expert-led coaching and group learning for adopting fast flow and team topologies. So get in touch if you like. And I'm looking forward to some questions and some chat after the talk. Hopefully that was useful. Thank you all.